The parkscape is a very important part of it here, and from one side you have the water and the village scale of buildings, and from the park, which is much more quiet, and also because we put this lid on top of the motorway, suddenly this place in the city is super nice, and it's very calm, it's dignified. It's a place you would like to sit, maybe have a coffee or meet some friends, spend a Saturday afternoon in the shade of the trees. 72,000 people walking in the door every morning. So it's a major workplace in a European context at that time. We did a very, let's say, experience-driven design process where we imagined some particular persons having a day and what was happening. The biggest issue for companies like Volkswagen is to attract young talent, and especially if your big facility is sitting a long way from a city center, and this is a long way from any city center you can think of, you have to create some attractions that makes it, let's say, at all reasonable for young people to live there at least during the week. And in Sweden they have something called allemansrätten, which means the right to be everywhere in nature, to put up your tent, to be at the cliffs, at the sea, or be in the woods. We looked at that, and we brought in the big round roof and the building on top of a hill. It's already sitting there, and so the sloping kind of terrain was part of it. And then we kind of looked at it as we were bringing parts of the forest, of the woods, into the city of Göteborg. So for visitors in Sweden, it's not just visiting and see some new car models. It's also to talk about the Swedish history. What is the industrial history of Sweden, which Volvo is so much a part of?
Sums up a lot of the challenges that architects and designers have over their careers, and that is dealing with time and trying to design something which is timeless. Lusail was a vision for a city, and as we all know, any of you who have traveled and worked in the Middle East, that the rate of progress there is truly phenomenal. But to us, it was also very important that we created places for people. So the three diagrams here very much summed up the orientation of the towers, that at the base, they would face one another. But by the time, if you look at the right-hand diagram, by the time the towers had twisted to their ultimate height, that they would face away from one another. The basic twisting form had certain limitations in the amount that the building could actually rotate as it ascended. Time has passed and our skill sets have increased, allowing us to deliver the original vision, but in an even better way. And it morphs a full 90 degrees, which is an improvement over the original concept scheme, which was only something like 30 to 40 degrees. You would expect, and indeed we did, do a whole number of wind tunnel tests. Had a benefit which we hadn't anticipated, and that was that its rough texture broke up the wind pattern. Was something which we then exploited, because we then tried to increase the projection of this texture to further reduce the wind loading. Inspired by Qatari architecture to create human spaces, wonderfully shaded and navigable throughout the year. We investigated ultra-high performance concrete, which has fantastic thermal properties, is lightweight, and achieves a wonderful balance between a solid, heavy facade that doesn't impose greatly on the structure of the podium buildings. It's very much a humanistic approach to creating spaces. The landscaping itself was very much to be using as many drought-resistant species as possible, to allow that landscape to contribute to shaded spaces. Qatar does have, as you would expect, a hot climate for many months of the year. The spaces are providing that sense of, I suppose, of community, really. They really will be places for people to enjoy this new city of Lusail.
And from that point of view, thinking about architecture just in terms of responding with iconic buildings and great design, sometimes just not enough. there is this kind of self-counseling effect where architectural icons get overlaid over other icons. And one of the few things that actually helps us recognize that this picture is indeed London is the only natural element in there, and it's the River Thames. And there is a great, from our point of view, there is a great fascination in actually specific needs for flow of people, for aggregation of people, and how we're going to help them to actually come together. And yet they broaden up the definition of what architecture can be and can do. And at the same time, we want to embrace the digital revolution. We want to embrace just use materials in the most effective way. So really reduce the cost of basic materials, reducing the weight, architecture having its own life, even without coming to full fruition of the construction. And this idea of the metaverse is something we've been using on different levels. On one end, so breaking down that kind of developer to architect discourse and actually extending that down to the end users. And then we take a lot of attention in what is the common spaces where people come together. We really want to encourage those areas, creating internal voids, which encourages a sense of awareness, a sense of understanding what's going on different levels of a building, and having a perception of the outside world from within, from the inside. Where really what we tried to do at the time was really trying to reimagine a piece of the city as an extension of nature. To be populated by the future users. So we used some kind of profiling for different people that would inhabit the master plan and thinking about their day life in the office. And that creates then a whole scenario game of how this whole master plan will come into play.
You want to really create the optimal space for people to facilitate their daily life. And you know, if you walk in a park, you never walk in 90 degrees angle. Why would you have to do that in a building? So, you know, the resources are getting scarcer, the economic pressure is higher. You have to put all of these things together, and there is kind of a piling up of challenges to the design team.
And one thing we discovered through the years was that we had to have a common way of looking at things, which is not a prescriptive design idea, but much more like a process of getting there. And then, of course, let's say the ideas of the world, so to speak.
We have what we call a design board. It's a way of ensuring that we have a house level of quality and pulling in suppliers and contractors as early as possible within a process. There's never one answer. There's the right answer at the right time for a right set of circumstances.
We have a set of criteria that we have to pass if we're going to say that something actually is regenerative.
We can see is that if we have the right, let's say, proportion of daylight in a space, if it's a learning situation, a school or university, we can see the learning curve is much better.
Architecture, design, practices, because we can all compete and we can all look at each other's work.
I think you've also got to make sure that, particularly when working with commercial clients, that you're giving them great value for money.
The challenge is so immense, and it requires a level of collaboration which we've never achieved or seen before.
I'm so optimistic about this reconnection to craftsmanship through this whole discussion of sustainability, digitalization, and stuff like that. Now we are honing in. I think it really gives us a chance also to do something about these bigger challenges we are facing.
I think the interest is always coming up with a different way of doing the same thing, or a different way of doing a different thing, because we are creative people. So innovation is perhaps something which we need to be constantly thinking about.
A true circular economy, I think, in the construction industry, it's a great challenge for the future. And I think that's really where we're going and where we're striving to go.